At 7:06 a.m., I found myself surrounded by police, firefighters, and environmental officers, all because I was installing a wheelchair access dock for disabled veterans. Standing behind them was Janet Harwick, our HOA president, arms crossed, chin up, like she'd just caught a supervillain. "He's contaminating the lake," she shouted. "He's destroying community property." Community property. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. While she was busy calling 911 to stop a charity project, I knew something didn't add up. 3 days later, after her lawyers started sending threats, I decided to check the property records myself. I spent hours in the courthouse basement, going through decades of documents. What I discovered shocked me. This lake wasn't what Janet thought it was. What would you do if someone called the cops to stop you from helping veterans? Tell me where you're watching from, because this story ends with an entire community losing their lake access forever. Every morning at 6 a.m., I sit on my dock with coffee, talking to Emma's framed photo about the therapy center we had planned together. "Morning, sweetheart," I'd say, watching steam rise off the water. Today we were starting the wheelchair ramps. The smell of fresh-cut lumber mixed with coffee had become my daily ritual 3 years after losing the love of my life to cancer. Emma's dying wish had haunted me in the best way possible. She wanted me to create an adaptive sailing program for disabled veterans, guys like my buddy Chuck, who lost his leg in Afghanistan, or Sarah Martinez, who came home with PTSD so bad she couldn't leave her apartment for months. Emma believed the lake could heal what war had broken. I'm Clayton Merrick, 58, a semi-retired marine engineer. I spent 30 years building docks and harbor systems, specializing in adaptive construction. After Emma passed, I started a small business designing accessible waterfront facilities. It kept me busy, kept me sane, kept her dream alive. Our community, Willowbrook Lake Estates, sits around a pristine 40-acre lake. 85 upscale homes average around $800,000. Every morning, joggers' footsteps echo on wooden dock planks while loons call across the misty water. Usually, the loudest sound is expensive gravel crunching under luxury SUVs. I live with my father-in-law, Joe, 84, who has Alzheimer's, but still asks about Emma every day. My daughter Sarah visits on weekends from Chicago with the grandkids. Emma's sailboat, Second Chances, sits covered in the garage, waiting for adaptive rigging that would never happen unless I made this therapy center real.
That's where Janet Harwick comes in. She's 52, a luxury real estate queen with a fake sweet southern drawl masking iron control. She inherited a $2 million lakefront mansion and considers herself the guardian of community standards. Translation: she decides who belongs and who doesn't. Janet's been HOA president for 15 years, running the board through intimidation and social manipulation. Her husband runs a law firm with city council connections, giving her influence far beyond our small lake. She built a neighborhood gossip network of concerned citizens who reported everything back to her. The Emma Adaptive Sailing Center was going to be big, a large floating dock system with wheelchair ramps, adaptive rigging for disabled sailors, a therapy pavilion for PTSD counseling, and storage for specialized equipment. I had every permit possible: Army Corps of Engineers approval, state environmental clearance, county building permits, even Coast Guard safety certification. But Janet saw our lake as her private country club. Emma's program threatened to bring outsiders into her paradise. I didn't understand the depth of her prejudice until Monday morning, July 15th at 7:15 a.m. I was installing the first dock foundation pilings when sirens shattered the morning peace. 3 sheriff's cruisers, a fire department hazmat unit, state environmental inspectors, a code enforcement officer, 12 officials in total, all because Janet had called 911. Her recorded emergency call, which I would later use as evidence, said I was dumping concrete and chemicals into a protected waterway, destroying the lake with illegal construction. Picture me in work boots and a safety vest, calmly showing valid permits to 12 officials, while Janet screamed from her mansion deck in silk pajamas and a face mask. Diesel fumes from the emergency vehicles mixed with the morning coffee I'd left on my truck tailgate. A work stoppage order came through despite my permits. My contractor abandoned the project, fearing legal trouble. $15,000 in equipment deposits gone. Veterans waiting for this program start.
Watching the emergency vehicles leave, I made a promise to Emma's photo. They want to play games with your dreams, sweetheart. Let's see how good they are at the rules they think they know. I had no idea I was about to discover something that would change everything. Janet's husband's law firm moved fast. By Wednesday, a process server knocked on my door while Joe was at a doctor appointment, serving legal papers in front of him. My confused father-in-law kept asking, "Why are the lawyers yelling at us?" The emergency injunction claimed unauthorized commercial development in a residential zone, environmental damage to a protected watershed, and demanded $1,000 per day fines for illegal construction. They threatened to seize my property if I continued. The intimidation was calculated. The threatening letter went to all 85 neighbors, painting me as a criminal destroying their lake. My contractor demanded a $5,000 kill fee to abandon the project. The adaptive equipment manufacturer canceled my $15,000 custom order. Worst of all, neighbors crossed the street to avoid me during morning walks. Chuck, my veteran buddy, questioned whether supporting this project was worth it. The local marine supplier refused to deliver materials. Sleepless nights staring at Emma's photo became routine. "They're trying to kill your dream, sweetheart," I whispered. "But you always said, fight smart, not hard." So I fought smart. 3 days at the county courthouse, methodically going through property records, tracing easements, cross-referencing tax records and survey maps. Most people don't know this about easements. They need proper legal language and regular renewal. Many informal arrangements from the 60s never received proper documentation. Think of easements like magazine subscriptions. They don't automatically renew.
The breakthrough came Thursday afternoon. Fluorescent lights flickered over faded deed maps. I sipped courthouse coffee, tasting like it was brewed in 1982, the exact year I was researching. There it was, the original temporary easement allowing HOA road access across my property, dated June 1st, 1982, expiring December 31st, 1982, for 6 months of construction access only. No legal record of renewal existed. 40-plus years of community assumptions were actually illegal trespassing. Walking back to my truck, boots echoing, I realized I'd discovered something bigger than dock permits. Every neighbor, every boat launch, every lake party depended on crossing my land illegally. Later, Janet's lawyer, wearing a $500 Italian suit, had just spent hours defending a position that didn't legally exist, like bringing a yacht to a canoe fight. But I wasn't ready to play my ace yet. 40 years of assumptions crumbling meant Janet's power structure was equally shaky. I started documenting everything, every vehicle, every visitor, every boat using my property. Security cameras would soon become key evidence for the biggest property rights case Willowbrook Lake had ever seen. The next morning, I hired Meridian Land Surveying for a full property mapping. $3,500 I could barely afford, but Emma's dream was worth it. If Janet wanted legal games, I was ready to show her what an engineer with time, motivation, and courthouse records could do. "Game on, Janet," I whispered to the morning mist, "but you won't like how this one ends."
Picks up the morning after I hired Meridian Land Surveying. Their team arrived at sunrise, instruments glinting in the mist, measuring every inch of my property with precision that only years of engineering experience could appreciate. I stood nearby, coffee in hand, while Joe shuffled out to watch. "Don't let them scare you, Clayton," he said, squinting at the surveyors like they were aliens. "You've always done things by the book." I nodded.
Emma's picture caught my eye on the dashboard of my truck, and I whispered, "This is for you, sweetheart. We're almost there." Surveyors completed their measurements by noon, producing a map that clearly outlined my property boundaries, easements, and legal rights. Every inch the HOA, Janet, and the neighbors assumed they owned but never legally possessed was now documented. This map would soon be my shield and my sword. Meanwhile, Janet ramped up her campaign. Flyers appeared in neighbors' mailboxes, calling me a reckless builder endangering the lake. Social media posts criticized the project as a personal vendetta against HOA tradition. Even some longtime friends who weren't on Janet's side hesitated to help, afraid of being drawn into legal battles or her personal attacks. But I wasn't backing down. I filed a formal complaint with the county, presenting the expired easement evidence. Environmental inspectors were called again by Janet, claiming ongoing violations, but my documentation, permits, and survey map made the claims impossible to sustain. The county eventually dismissed the complaints after a detailed review. Every document, every photo, every recorded interaction stacked in my favor.
Chuck, my veteran friend, visited that evening. He brought Sarah Martinez along. She smiled for the first time in months when she saw the dock foundations taking shape again. "This is going to change lives," she said, tears in her eyes. It wasn't just a dock. It wasn't just a ramp. It was a place where soldiers, amputees, PTSD survivors could feel alive again. Emma's dream was finally becoming tangible. Janet's next move was subtle but cunning. She tried to sway the remaining HOA board members by promising private lake parties and exclusive access rights if they sided with her. Some members wavered, but once the survey map and expired easement evidence circulated among them, their hesitation disappeared. The truth was undeniable. Her influence, strong as it seemed, had limits when confronted with documented facts. By mid-August, construction resumed fully. Volunteers from the local Veterans Association arrived, carrying beams, installing rails, and prepping boats. The Emma Adaptive Sailing Center began to take shape. The therapy pavilion was framed, docks extended into calm waters, and adaptive equipment started arriving. For the first time since losing Emma, I felt a sense of progress that wasn't haunted by her absence, but inspired by it. Janet didn't quit. She filed one last attempt, a temporary injunction claiming irreparable harm to property values. Her lawyer even suggested a last-minute environmental study that would take months. I countered immediately, submitting all permits, the survey map, and detailed photos of construction activity showing no environmental damage. A judge reviewed the case and within days dismissed Janet's claims. Her argument fell apart because she relied on assumptions, not legal facts.
The final confrontation came when Janet organized a public HOA meeting to discuss community concerns. She assumed public pressure would intimidate me. Instead, I presented the facts calmly. Survey maps projected on the wall, photographs showing dock construction compliance, documentation proving expired easements, and letters from veterans waiting to use the facility. Neighbors gasped. Some who had blindly followed Janet realized how manipulated they'd been. The turning point was the veterans' testimonies. Chuck described losing his leg in combat and the isolation afterward. Sarah Martinez spoke of her PTSD and how she had been unable to leave her apartment for months. Their stories silenced the room. Janet tried to interrupt, but the judge, who had been invited to observe the meeting, reminded her that facts mattered more than theatrics. By the end of the meeting, the HOA board voted unanimously to support the Emma Adaptive Sailing Center. Janet was forced to step down as HOA president. She left the meeting visibly frustrated but powerless.
Legal battles over easements were settled in my favor, granting full and documented rights to my property while preserving community access only where it was legally justified. With construction finally completed, the grand opening arrived. Families, veterans, and children gathered at the lake. Emma's sailboat, Second Chances, floated proudly, adapted for wheelchair access. Laughter echoed across the water, filling every corner that had once been shadowed by fear. Watching Chuck guide his first adaptive sailboat into open water, I realized the battle wasn't just about property lines or HOA rules. It was about protecting a dream and giving others the chance to heal, to find hope. Emma's vision had survived, stronger than any obstacle Janet or anyone else had thrown in the way. Months later, the Emma Adaptive Sailing Center became a model program. News outlets covered our story, praising the community effort and highlighting the importance of accessibility for veterans. More importantly, the lake was no longer a place of conflict. It became a place of healing, laughter, and remembrance. I often sit on the dock at sunrise, coffee in hand, watching the sun glimmer on the lake. Joe, older now but still sharp, sometimes chuckles at how Janet's emergency calls once disrupted our mornings. Chuck and Sarah Martinez are regulars, their smiles reflecting hope that once seemed impossible. Emma's photo still sits on my dashboard, but now her eyes seem to sparkle with pride, as if saying, "You did it, Clayton." This battle reminded me that rules and influence can intimidate, but documented truth, determination, and purpose will always outlast fear. Janet Harwick may have tried to control the lake, but in the end, the water belongs to everyone who respects it and has the courage to protect what's right. The Emma Adaptive Sailing Center continues to grow. We added a small education pavilion teaching adaptive sailing techniques, funded scholarships for disabled veterans, and partnered with local hospitals for therapy sessions. The lake, once a battleground, now reflects a community transformed. Families, veterans, and neighbors who doubted the program now volunteer. The place hums with life and gratitude. I sometimes think back to that first morning when sirens blared and officials surrounded me. If I had given up, Emma's dream would have died, and the lake would have remained a symbol of fear rather than hope. Instead, perseverance, patience, and careful documentation changed everything. Life continues on Willowbrook Lake. Mornings are quieter now, filled with birdsong instead of sirens. Boats glide across the water, laughter spilling into the sky. I still sip coffee on the dock, speaking to Emma's photo, sharing the little victories, the smiles, and the healing moments. Every time a veteran wheels onto the dock or a child shouts from a sailboat, I remember why this fight mattered. HOA Prime Stories brings you tales like this, not just for drama, but to remind us all that courage, integrity, and commitment to what's right can triumph even when odds seem impossible. That lake, once the center of conflict, now represents hope, community, and the fulfillment of a dream that refused to die.